Oh, turn my video on. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Planning and Community Development Committee meeting for Thursday, October 21st, 2021. It's 9:31. I'd like to call this meeting to order and acknowledge that the SCRD is located on the territories of the Sechelt and Squamish nations. We do have an agenda in front of us today. Are there any changes to be made to the agenda before we adopt it? I don't see any hands up, so look for motion to adopt the agenda as presented. Moved, seconded. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. Just before we move on to our delegation today, look for motion to receive all reports and delegation materials and minutes and communications, please. Moved, seconded. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. All right, moving on to item number 2. We have a delegation from the House Sound Marine Reference Guide. And IT, if you want to, thank you. Fiona, we'll turn it over to you.
Good morning, everybody. Pleasure to be here. I'm here with Ruth Simon, just in her video off, or turned it on. There's a bit of feedback on my end. Does it sound okay from yours?
It's a little choppy on our end, but I don't know if that will clear itself as you continue speaking.
Okay. It might be that if there's more than one person in the room with their mic on, folks have to mute themselves, but we can just kind of proceed. Oh, that sounds a lot better. Does that sound better on your end? Okay, great. So I'll share my screen, but I'll hand it over to Ruth to kickstart our presentation.
Hi, good morning, Chair and board members. I'm just here to introduce Fiona, and I give a little bit of a context to the importance of the Marine Reference Guide to the Atkatsum House Sound UNESCO Biosphere Region, and the organization I represent, the House Sound Biosphere Region Initiative Society. The Marine Reference Guide has been a wonderful project, as you know, under development for 3 years. It's extremely important to the ongoing work of the biosphere region, particularly going forward as we work towards comprehensive land and marine use planning for the region. The request, of course, is to continue to help ensure that this is a sustainable tool and a sustainable management of this project, which is beyond more than just a tool, but community engagement, as Fiona will explain. We look forward to seeing some of you tomorrow at the House Sound Community Forum and be able to answer more questions there. Over to you, Fiona.
Thank you very much, Ruth. So as Ruth just described, I'm here today to present to you an overview of the Marine Reference Guide, which has been operating as a project since 2018 with the SCRD's support, in addition to the other local governments in the area. And I'm also here to introduce what's coming next for our project as we wrap up our first stage and start to plan the second phase of the initiative. So just as a recap, the Marine Reference Guide has been working since 2018 to create resources and decision support tools that inform marine spatial planning and education in the sound associated with the ocean and the freshwater in this area. And we've been working towards this goal by doing 3 main things. First, we've been conducting research to fill knowledge gaps associated with the ocean and create tools such as online interactive maps and reports that help decision makers proactively plan to protect the area's ocean health and also community well-being. Second, we've been devoting a lot of energy into building relationships across the diverse governments, communities, and stakeholders in the region so that people can work together collaboratively to achieve common objectives. And finally, we've been conducting a bunch of community engagements, such as workshops and events, to build a stronger sense of place, and again, inform and strengthen communication patterns so that we can be proactive stewards of ocean health in the area. The main tool that we've been developing that relates to local and regional government planning is our online interactive map. And rather than describe it, I have a short video that kind of walks you through what this map is. So in this map, which is publicly available on our website, we have over 400 spatial data layers associated with the sound. And the whole point with interactive maps is that you can overlay these data layers so you can understand how things interact in space and where there might be conflicts or compatibilities across different data. The great thing too is that it visualizes data from different governments, from different sectors that previously were stored in different resources. So right now I've turned on rockfish conservation areas, a federal data layer, regional district boundaries, a provincial data layer, and now we're turning on local government development permit areas from the Islands Trust, Gibsons, and the SCRD. So you can see how these all are visualized together and kind of interact in space. Now we're turning on glass sponge reefs, which is a very popular data layer associated with Howe Sound's marine environment. And for every data layer, you can click it in the map to access metadata about it, which is just kind of like who created the data layer and where you can access more information. The little green asterisks are sponge gardens, which were collected by scuba divers that work with OceanWise. And now we've turned on cetacean sightings, which is every time someone's seen a marine mammal in the region and reported it, it's gone into this database. So in addition to ecology and administrative, we have a lot of different human use data layers. So here we're turning on forestry cut blocks, which is really important in the West Howe Sound area. And now we're turning on some cargo routes so that you can see where the marine traffic might be throughout the area. Finally, I'll turn on a tourism and recreation data layer, such as camps, which again, you can see there's a good number of these marine trail campsites through Thornborough Channel. And finally, we have brought in Squamish Nation place names where appropriate so that we can help to visualize and strengthen people's awareness of Squamish language and culture. So that's a very quick roller coaster ride to see some of the data in our map that may relate to the SCRD's planning and decision making. And we're very grateful to the SCRD planners for sharing data with us so far so that we can really augment and ensure that this map visualizes all of the different information that may relate to ocean health in the area. Our project does have a watershed scope, so we are interested in reflecting what's happening in the region's watersheds because that does directly impact ocean health, and in turn, the health of the ocean impacts what's happening on land. So I want to take a moment to pause and just say thank you for your support of the project over the last 3 years. The SCRD, along with the other 9 local governments in the area, did contribute financial support to this project, which really helped us to bolster and leverage support of other foundations. But more importantly, it demonstrated that this tool is of value and importance to your governments and your communities. And that's what we really want to sustain and augment, grow into the next phase of the project. So thank you. And now I'm going to switch focuses to looking forward. So we've mapped out a phase 2 of the project, which will operate for 5 years from 2022 to 2027. And the structure of this initiative will look very much like the first phase, where we are a project on Makeway's shared platform. Makeway is a national charity. And our project will have the mission of leading marine and freshwater research, education, and community engagement in service of planning and relationship building in Atkatsum, Howe Sound. Atkatsum is one of 3 Squamish Nation place names for the area, and it's important that we bring that into our project's name. Importantly, the second phase will also have a strong mandate to align with the biosphere's goals of reconciliation, biodiversity conservation, and sustainable development. So there's that really strong continuity across the 2 projects, as Ruth mentioned at the beginning. In terms of what this project will be doing, very similar activities to what we've been doing for the last 3 years. We'll have 3 programmatic focuses. The first is to build and sustain the decision support tools that we've already been working on, like that interactive map. But we also hope to produce a new series of vital signs reports that kind of builds upon the Ocean Watch reporting that came out of OceanWise. The second is that we will continue to fill in knowledge gaps associated with the ocean through conducting field research and working with different citizen science groups throughout the area. And finally, we have a very strong education component and emphasis. Thus far, we've been working mostly with high schools, but we hope to expand that to start to build partnerships with post-secondary institutions like Capilano, Quest University, and UBC. Again, working with the biosphere for that. And if you're interested in more programming, I can go into detail. I just didn't fill this presentation with all of this information. In terms of budgeting, we have a very similar budget to our first phase, where we have an annual operating budget of $200,000 and request to local governments to support 10% of our annual operating budget, which is broken down according to the populations of each area. So that's the same approach that we did with phase 1. And this is what it looks like when you break down that annual contribution and the 5-year contribution. And I'm happy to share these slides with anyone if they're interested in more details, but for the sake of this presentation, I think we'll just kind of focus on the project's bigger scale impact. That said, the Ocean Watch Task Force, which has been providing guidance and oversight to the first phase of the project, has requested that the following 2 recommendations be brought forward to Council. So I'm bringing that forward on their behalf, which is that the governments and boards include contributions towards phase 2 of the Marine Reference Guide, which will be under the purview of the biosphere in your 5-year financial plans as outlined in that table. And then the second request is that the boards and governments, boards and councils include contributions towards the guide via Make Way in your annual budgets each year from 2022 to 2027. So that's kind of it for my presentation. My requests to you today are to hear any feedback that you have on the first and second phases of the projects, and to hear any support or recommendations you have for bringing this funding request through your board. But most importantly, I just want to say thank you again for your support, and thank you for your ongoing energy towards building collaborative planning and intergovernmental collaboration in the region. I think it's an incredible testament to how, when we work together, we can achieve our common objectives. And so I will stop sharing my screen now, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation. That's an incredible amount of data that you guys have managed to pool together into one resource. I will turn to my directors to see if there are any questions. Director Hiltz.
Thanks. First of all, a comment. Like you're saying, 400 data layers. It's a large number to try to understand. And I was trying to understand it when we were having our stormwater events this past week. And one of the layers that I turned on was slope. And something that became really apparent is that this point of Howe Sound is one of the largest areas of flatland in Howe Sound, which I kind of knew that, but there was actually a layer that I could visualize that, which was interesting. Because it's this co-location of data layers, which I find really interesting in this, because it's looking at Howe Sound broadly and connects all the local governments and all the interest groups. So it was, I would say it was fun. It was illuminating. It is a GIS system, which takes a bit of effort to learn. So one of the questions that I have is really for staff, is for SCRD staff, have they been able to use it in any of their planning decisions, or how do they perceive this reference guide?
Yes, thank you for that question, and thank you for that comment as well, of the value of this tool is just kind of thinking beyond the small area into that bigger region. That is one of the biggest emphases for this project. In terms of connecting with SCRD staff, we did host a workshop in June with a number of different planners to kind of review this tool and introduce it to them, and go over any recommendations they have for how we could improve it and understand how they might find it of value to their planning. One thing that comes up when we speak with local government planners is that it can be important for any sort of referrals that come by them, so that they can look at what's happening in the ocean, because the ocean does fall outside of the jurisdiction of a lot of local governments, but that said, it is an important thing for people to keep in mind. And so it's helpful to have that information. It also is helpful so that they can point community members towards this resource for individuals who are interested in learning more about what's happening in the ocean in the area. So I think those two functions are kind of direct values. And then we'll continue to work on how we can use this to support intergovernmental workflows. For example, how the province works together with local government and First Nations and federal governments, because it is kind of a one-stop shop for their data.
Thank you for that. GM Hall, did you want to add anything?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, staff are using it for referrals in the area, and the completeness and ease of use make it a valued resource for staff. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Directors, any other? Director McMahon.
This is just an internal SCRD question. I had the impression we were handling this through grant and aid. Is that the case? The financial line item? Okay.
Director Ties.
Yeah, I just wanted to take a moment just to say a personal thank you and for all your engagement, especially Ruth, in this initiative, and I haven't had a chance to say congratulations on being designated a UNESCO biosphere. So I think it's fantastic, and this marine reference guide is another testament to your guys' hard work, and I think it's a very useful tool. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Hiltz, did you want to? You're good?
Yeah.
go ahead, Director Seegers.
So my understanding, grant and aid would require the, like Ruth and the group, Ruth and Fiona, to actually put an application in through our process. So it's not something that's going to happen automatically. And we as directors do not put forward those applications. So you'll need to check with our staff and probably a director in the area as to the process.
Thank you for the comments. Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation. I think we're all supportive of the work that you're doing. Yeah, and look forward to seeing what you come up with next or how you move this forward. So thank you very much today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. Moving on in our agenda, we have item number 3, request for additional public hearing for zoning amendment bylaw 310-182 for subdivision of remainder of District Lot 1312. It's a verbal from GM Hall.
Thank you, Chair. As directors know, due to a publication glitch, which staff sincerely regret not spotting prior to the undertaking of a public hearing effort, we did not complete a successful public hearing for this application, and so staff are requesting that a board resolution be made that delegates the holding of a public hearing for this matter again. And the wording for a resolution has been passed to the chair and to the recording secretary. And staff's recommendation is that it state that a public hearing to consider Roberts Creek Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 641.11, 2019, and Zoning Bylaw Amendment number 310.182, 2019, be scheduled for 7 p.m. on date to be confirmed, 2021, to be held in the SCRD boardroom located at 1975 Field Road, Seashelt, and that the public hearing be conducted by means of electronic or other communication facilities to facilitate electronic participation for the public hearing as authorized by Section 465 of the Local Government Act, and further that a director be delegated as the chair and another as alternate chair to conduct the public hearing. And while wordy, the middle part of that recommended motion enables us to conduct a hybrid public hearing that allows participation here in the boardroom as well as by electronic means. And the public notifications will be plainer English. The wording here mirrors current provincial regulation. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And with regards to the date to be determined, that will be confirmed before it's adopted at board, correct?
Yes, that's right. Once we know who the delegated chair and alternate chair are, we'll work to confirm the date. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Directors, anybody want to volunteer for chair and vice chair? Director Ties?
Yeah, thank you. As is the custom, I will be the alternate chair. And I would like to request that the date is not, I think, the 23rd, because I usually have my official community plan committee meeting that week. So the 23rd of November is the one that we'd like to avoid.
All right, thank you. Anybody want to chair it? I think Director Pratt chaired the last one. Unfortunately, she's not here
Yeah,
today. So.
I can put my name forward as long as the date works for me. I
Okay.
can chair. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. So we have a chair and an alternate chair for the public hearing and a date to be determined. Would somebody from rural planning like to put forward that motion? Moved, Director McMahon. Seconded, Director Ties. Any other comments, questions? All those in favor, A, B, D, E, and F. And that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 4, Annex A, Telus Telecommunication Tower at Coast Gravity Park. Request for local government concurrence. Turn it over to the senior planner.
Thank you, Chair. This is the request by Telus to provide local government land use concurrence on a proposed 60-meter tall telecommunication tower to be located on the hillside of Coast Gravity Park in Half Moon Bay. The purpose of the new facility is to improve wireless communication service to residents, business, and tourists in the district of Seashell and the SCRD, as well as for E911 service, search and rescue, and other emergency response organizations. The subject property is a large forested property situated on the east side of Seashell Inlet, away from residential areas. The proposed location is considered to be appropriate by Telus. Telus has conducted the required consultation and received no comments from the public. Telus is also working with Seashell Airport to address lighting maintenance issues with the tower. The Half Moon Bay APC recommends support for the project, so staff recommend providing concurrence regarding this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I do have one question which came up when I was talking to some residents of the area. It happens to be my neighborhood, so what's is Telus, I assume Telus is bringing in permanent power to run the tower. Do we know if they're planning on bringing power into Coast Gravity Park to go with that, or not?
Thank you, Chair. Staff was not provided with information in this regard, but there will be, well, for emergency power, there will be a generator at the base of the tower.
Okay. Thank you very much. I did forward this to the East Porpoise Bay Community Association just because they're adjacent to the area, and their directors were all in favor of it. So happy to see it moving forward. And otherwise, directors, any questions, comments, motions? Director Ties?
Yeah, happy to move the recommendations as shown on page 1.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? I do have a seconder. So this is voting A, B, D, E, and F, rural planning. I don't see any other hands up, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to Annex B, item number 5, application for subdivision in the ALR, 2061 Twin Creeks Road. Turn this back over to Mr. Seau.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a referral from the Agricultural Land Commission regarding a subdivision of a parcel at 2061 Twin Creek Road, which is partially within the Agricultural Land Reserve in West Howe Sound. Analysis of this report finds the application to be reasonable and consistent with the West Howe Sound OCP, the zoning bylaw, and the Scrd agricultural area plan. To ensure farming will occur and residential uses will be limited on the subdivided lots within the ALR, construction of the access driveway and bridge, restriction of residential uses to home plates, and preparation of the lands for agriculture are recommended as conditions for the subdivision approval. Based on that, staff recommends supporting this application subject to those conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Directors. Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the report. This is a challenging piece of property that is well known about the challenges of the ravines, and as it's moved forward from the last application, I think what staff has put together as a source of recommendations works for me and the area. It'll leave the decision to the ALC. So I'm supportive of the recommendations as they're presented. It looks after things like the stray garbage cans on unimproved roads and things like that you see the cluster like on Bing Road where you see 12 garbage cans in one place. So I think they've addressed that. The preparation for agriculture, I think, satisfies the issues around the ALC or the Agricultural Committee. One typo, I think, in the further than, I think it's a further that. So one small typo there. I just saw that. And I do have a question, though. And that is, the applicant has talked about a community garden as kind of a farming model. So I was just wondering if anyone had any information on what that farming model looks like. Thank you.
Great question. Is anybody in a position to answer that question?
Chair, staff would note that the applicant is in our virtual gallery and might be able to answer that. Thank you.
Perfect. If IT can bring them in, that would be great.
Could I have a name, please?
That's a good question.
The applicant is Mr. Lucas Chamberlain, please. Thank you.
Sorry, I don't see him.
I don't see him there either, actually. So,
My apologies, Chair, and IT team. Mr. Chamberlain was with us earlier, but seems to have left.
okay. Director Hiltz, are you okay to follow up on that question offline, or does it impact how you're going to vote on this decision?
It's not a material impact. I think from reporting back to the Agricultural Committee, they'd be interested to know what a commercial community garden is. So that's where I'm, so whether we'll be able to bring it up probably in the minutes of the AAC in the future. So yeah, I'm okay with that. So I'm happy to move the recommendations, which are on page 14. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I have a seconder for that. I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question. A, B, D, E, and F. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to Annex C, Development Permit Application DP 000218 for 969 Keith Road. We'll turn it over to Mr. Copes.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this form and character development permit is to evaluate a proposal to permit the recent placement of 2 Quonset tents and the proposed placement of 2 portable buildings. The applicant's proposal was evaluated based on guidelines established in the Elphinstone Official Community Plan for the Rural Industry Development Permit area. The application was referred to the Elphinstone APC, who recommend approval of the development permit. Staff have found the proposal to be consistent with the DPA guidelines and recommend issuance of the permit. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Directors. Director McMahon.
Thank you. I noticed that the representative of the applicant is in the audience there. I just noticed after the APC meeting that the ownership of the parcel wasn't explained in the application, and I was just wondering if it's under new ownership since it was last here for other planning reasons.
All right, good question. Did staff want to, or do staff have the answer to that, or should we let the applicant in to talk? GM Hall?
Thank you, Chair. Staff don't have ownership information here in front of us. We're responding to the application as received, and if the owner or agent wishes to answer questions, then perhaps they could. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. I'll go to Director Hiltz in the meantime.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I did have a question for staff. It's on page 58. It's staff comments. It's about a site disclosure statement, which I understand. If you could put some context around that, it's a fairly new thing, and it has to do with suspected contaminated lands, and this is in the aquifer recharge area. So I'm just wondering how that process works, and will the SCRD receive the disclosure statement for their official records? Thanks.
Yes, thank you for the question. Yes, the site disclosure statement process is a new process which replaced the site profile process. The applicant needs to fill out a site disclosure statement, which the SCRD forwards to the Ministry of Environment for the records. The Ministry of Environment also will likely need to issue some sort of compliance or release document, and that document needs to be issued before we can issue the development permit.
Thank you for that. I'm going to give the owner representative permission to speak here if they wanted to address the previous question.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
We can hear you just fine.
Oh, good. Well, thank you. So I believe that it's under new ownership from the previous applications that were made in the past. That was the previous owner who made those applications.
Okay, thank you. Director McMahon.
Good, thank you, because there was a landscaping plan that the previous owner committed to in 2013 that sounds very much like the landscaping plan that we have here, except that this one is much more nicely illustrated. So I also had a question for staff about what is the process, what happens when people erect buildings without a building permit? What's the consequence of erecting a building without a building permit?
You mean beyond the usual notice on title?
Right.
Okay. GM Hall? Or Mr. Copes or whoever?
Thank you, Chair. So a general answer to the question, because every case is evaluated based on the specifics of the matter at hand. But doubling of fees, the potential for bylaw enforcement actions, including tickets, the placement of notice on title, and ultimately, potentially, the pursuit of legal action if there are significant concerns, are all tools in the toolbox of the regional district. Thanks.
Thank you. Good. All right. Directors, any other questions, comments, recommendations? Director Beamish. Microphone.
A question regarding, two questions. One is the nature of the fill on the southwest corner of that property. Is that coming from off-site, and is that being monitored relative to the drainage that comes through that gully at the back?
Good question. Yeah. GM Hall, I see you're reaching for the microphone, or no?
Well, thank you, Chair. I respectfully just want to note that the application in front of us is a form and character application related to a couple of buildings. Of course, it's the committee's prerogative to seek information about other items as they see fit. But I wouldn't want items unrelated to the application to come into the decision-making process. Thank you.
Thank you, GM Hall. Director Beamish?
Yeah, I guess I'm just more concerned from the downstream benefits of what happens above us in the town of Gibson's. The development is occurring on to the east of that property, that lot that's being cleared, that's not associated with this property, I'm assuming. Yeah. Do we know what's happening there?
Director McMahon.
Across the street there is an RV park, but it's an unrelated development.
Yeah, there's all that picture we see here, that's all now cleared land across the street, so. And, yeah, just a long-term concern about the impacts of the downstream effects of what happens above us. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Beamish. Director McMahon.
Yes, I have no concerns about the landscaping plan as presented, but I do, after the serious flooding we had last weekend, I do share Director Beamish's concern about riparian issues in my area and would be interested to find a way to address that at a future planning meeting in the appropriate venue. So in the meantime, I'm happy to move the recommendations on page 53.
All right, thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Seconded. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, A, B, D, E, and F? That's carried. Thank you very much.
Oh, is my hand still up? Sorry, I lowered my hand.
No, your mic, Bill.
My hand and my mic.
I know, it's a lot of buttons for us to push. I didn't see it with the monitor lowered. All right, moving on to Annex D, Development Variance Permit DVP 00075 for number 3, 15200 Hallowell Road. Turn this over to Mr. Copes.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this development variance permit application is to reduce the setback for a building from Sackanaw Lake from 20 meters to 15 meters to permit the construction of a single-family dwelling. Our riparian assessment report has established a 15-meter streamside protection and enhancement area, and no vegetation within that area would be disrupted. Notifications were distributed to the neighboring properties and no comments have been received. Staff recommend issuance of the permit.
All right. Apparently we got email. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Copes. Directors, Director Lee.
Yes, I have a couple of questions. Is there any technical reason why this wasn't referred to the Area A APC?
All right. That is one of the options that is presented for us. GM Hall.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Director, for the question. The technical reason is that as part of the process improvements that were discussed earlier this year, aimed at making our planning processes more efficient and making best use of the time of the parties involved, including our volunteer APCs. DVPs were determined to not automatically be referred to APCs, and that's on the basis that the effects tend to be quite local, not area-wide. And so the starting point is that reports will be brought forward with referral as an option, should the committee wish. Thank you.
Thank you, GM Hall. I made a little bit of a misstep. I've actually got a script that I'm supposed to read before I let anybody ask questions, so I'm going to go back to that. Having heard staff's introduction of the proposed development variance permit, if there's anybody in the webinar audience who wishes to speak to the application, we ask that you raise your hand using the raise hand tool, and we will unmute you in the order of the hands received. When you speak, I'll ask you to please give your full name and address for the record. I'll ask you to please keep your comments focused and to limit them to 3 minutes. Once the committee has heard from all those wishing to speak, we will proceed with a motion and discussion towards recommendations to the board. So with that said, is there anybody in the gallery who wishes to speak to this? I don't see any other any hands up, so apologies, directors. I just needed to get that out of the way. So, Director Lee.
I note in option 3 that there's a mention that it could be given to the Board of Variance. I was wondering 2 things. Why that's included as an option or a comment in the option. I haven't seen that before. And who has decided that that is an option, which therefore must say that this is considered a minor variance and an economic hardship, which would only be the only reason it could go to a Board of Variance. So I was wondering if I could get comments on that.
GM Hall.
Thank you, Chair. Under the Local Government Act, applicants always have a right to apply to the Board of Variance, and it's up to the Board of Variance to determine if a hardship exists. So the inclusion of, or the mention of that option here is only to point out that that possibility exists under legislation. It's not a recommendation, nor is it a confirmation that a hardship does exist. It's just something that is a possibility for the applicant should they, should this variance not be approved by the SCRD board. Thanks.
Thank you, GM Hall. Director Lee, did you have a follow-up?
No, I think I'll leave that particular one alone. The Area A is quite different from the other areas in that we have extensive lakefront homes being developed. And our APC, our official community plan, goes into setbacks and reasons. And our zoning bylaw 337 has not been updated to reflect our current OCP, which is problematic when considering these kind of issues. So with that said, I'd prefer that this be provided to my APC for comments prior to us making our decisions.
Thank
so
you,
that
Director.
would be, my motion would be to accept option 2, which is
Refer the application to the
refer
Area
the
A.
application to the Area A APC.
Okay, I do see a mover and I do see a seconder for that. So that is on the floor. Any other questions, comments? Director Hiltz? See you madly looking for buttons.
Not directly related to the recommendation. I just had a question on the comments from, it was the Egmont Fire Department. If there was any further information on that, I was looking at the property. It's a large strata, end of road, no water service. Looks like the roads aren't necessarily great for fire trucks to go in. So can anyone just expand on that kind of statement about anyone have information on that?
That's in the top half of page 66 in the referral table.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question. This application was referred to the Egmont Fire Department. The fire chief noted a number of concerns with the parent parcel in general related to firefighting capacity. However, these concerns are not directly related to the variance at hand and warrant a separate discussion.
Okay, thank you. All right, I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question. A, B, D, E, and F. All those in favor of referral to the APC? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to Annex E, Development Variance Permit Application DVP 00076 for 9517 Brooks Lane. Turn this back over to Mr. Copes.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this development variance permit application is to reduce the setback for a side parcel line contiguous to a highway from 4.5 meters to 2.62 meters for the building and 1.69 meters for the roof overhang to facilitate the construction of a single-family dwelling. The applicant has noted that the setback variance is required due to the small size of the lot and the required setback to the natural boundary of the ocean. 7 neighboring residents submitted written comments, all noting concerns and some stating objections to the proposed variance. Residents noted concerns relating to parking within the road right-of-way, which is incorrectly labeled as a private driveway on the site plan. Residents also stated that the construction would be too close to a large old-growth tree on the edge of the right-of-way, in addition to other trees on the property which would all be endangered by the construction. In addition, concerns over the lack of room for a septic system and lack of wastewater treatment details were noted. The applicant has noted that the owners intend to park in the garage on site and preserve the existing trees. Given the constraints of the site, staff recommend issuance of the permit.
Thank you, Mr. Copes. Having heard staff's introduction of the proposed development variance permit, if there's anybody in the webinar audience wishing to speak to the application, we ask that you raise your hand using the raise hand tool, and we will unmute you in the order of hands raised. When you speak, I'll ask you to please give your full name and address for the record. I'll ask you to please keep your comments focused and to limit them to 3 minutes. Once the committee has heard from all those wishing to speak, we will proceed with a motion and discussion towards recommendation to the board. I do see a hand up, so I'm going to give them permission to speak. You should be able to unmute yourself. Full name and address for the record, and then go ahead.
Hello, my name is Bart Freimel. I live at 9530 Brooks Lane. And although I share an easement driveway that is within 17 meters of this property, I was not contacted by the SCRD. I learned of this variance through neighbors that share the driveway. And I urge the committee to refer this report back to staff or the APC to ensure time for adequate consultation with the Brooks Cove community and a response from Modi regarding the setback permit for the road right-of-way. The current staff recommendation to issue the permit is ill-informed in regards to unique site constraints and environmental impacts. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I see another hand raised, so we will give them permission to speak. Please introduce yourself for the record and then go ahead.
Hello, my name is Leanne Annex. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you just fine.
Thank you. I live at 5066 Sherman Lane at the end of Brooks Road, and I'm directly across from the proposed development. I'd just like to voice my concern for the old growth trees in the vicinity of the build. Two in particular, trees that are 700 to 800 years old, coastal Douglas fir, and the build will have to be very careful to not disturb the roots of those trees. The variance, I'm not sure that the community has been properly consulted, and I would back up my previous speaker, Freimel, that maybe more consultation needs to happen. It's a tight community, it's a tough build, it just needs to be looked at very, very carefully. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. I see Kai Jenkins, the owner, has raised their hand, so I'm going to give them permission to speak.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you, Chair. This is Kai Jenkins here of Seashelt. I am the general contractor, not the owner, so the owners are most likely listening in here, Tiffany Murray and David Pikash, as well as our designer. So just to answer a few questions here, the old growth trees are noted on our site plan. We are going to make every effort to protect those trees. The owners have asked us to do that from the outset, and it is our intention to do so unless the trees are unsafe for the building or any other residents within harm's way. As far as I had known, the neighborhood had been consulted on the proposal. So, it certainly is a technically demanding site. There's no doubt about that, and that's why we're here today. We have approached Modi and are working through the permit process. So I hope that answers some questions.
All right, thank you very much for your comments. I don't see any other hands up, so I will move to my directors. I believe Director McMahon was first.
Right. I just, given the complexity of this application and the concerns of neighbors and the fact that the Area B director is not available today, I think the most appropriate thing would be to refer this application to the APC. So I'm going to make that motion.
And I do see a seconder. We do have the great shakeout is supposed to be happening imminently, so if anybody's got any questions pertaining to the motion, we're going to recess for 5 minutes. Otherwise, we'll vote on the motion and then recess. Director Hiltz, I had seen your hand.
Yes. I had a question about the driveway, but from the applicant. But
send it to the APC and then
send it to the APC.
Okay, then I will call the question A, B, D, and F. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. We are going to take a 5-minute recess, and we will be back after our simulated earthquake. IT, if you want to count us down, I think we're ready to resume.
You're alive.
All right, thank you very much. Welcome back, everybody, to the Planning and Community Development Committee for Thursday, October 21st. Our simulated earthquake is over, and thankfully there were no injuries in the building. Moving on to Annex F, frontage waiver application for FRW 00012 for 1430 Bonnybrook Heights Road. Again, back to Mr. Copes.
Thank you, Chair. This frontage waiver is to facilitate a 15-lot subdivision located at 1430 Bonnybrook Heights Road in the Elphinstone electoral area. The frontage of proposed lots 8, 9, 14, and 15 are less than 10% of the perimeter of the parcel, requiring a frontage waiver. Due to the proposed lot layout and the road location, a frontage waiver is required for 4 of the proposed lots. Parkland dedication has already been taken from the parent parcel. The Ministry of Transportation has no concerns with the lot layout and has issued preliminary layout approval for the proposed subdivision. Staff consider the frontage waiver reasonable and recommend approval.
Thank you very much. Director McMahon?
Do you need to do the script again?
No, I don't need to do the script for these.
All right. Yes, this generated a fair amount of interest in the Georgia Crest neighborhood. In general, this is quite straightforward, and the pedestrian connection through from Solaz Place to Bonnybrook Heights Road is very much appreciated. The neighborhood raised a lot of questions about the covenanted right-of-way on the north side of this property. You can see it in the diagram here. It's in the previous development. There is a very narrow covenanted corridor there. And there was a lot of interest on the part of the community in trying to build in a little more width to that corridor so that it could connect through to Georgia Crest Park, which is right on the left side there. Because otherwise, you can get to Georgia Crest Park, but you have to walk all the way around, right? And the developer said that they were going to see if there was anything they could do about it, but we didn't really hear back on that. So I don't know if anybody is available to comment on that.
Is the developer or their representative in the gallery to comment on that? Got too many screens. Anybody is welcome to jump in if they've got the answer to that question.
Thank you, Chair. I'll do my best to answer the question. I do not see the applicant in the gallery. There is a covenanted area to the, I believe it's to the east of this parcel along the ravine. And that piece is outside of the property line for this parcel. It is actually part of the parcel directly to the south with a little strip to the side. And we do not have any plans currently submitted for that parcel.
I think the question was pertaining to the north edge of the parcel running east to west. There's a very, very, very narrow covenanted corridor just across the north edge of the parcel.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, I do not have any information readily available in relation to that.
Okay, thank you. Directors, any other questions, comments, recommendations? Director McMahon?
I will move the recommendations on page 77.
Okay, and I see that seconded. Any other last minute comments, questions? I don't see any hands. I will call the question. A, B, D, E, and F. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to Annex G, Service Agreement with Town of Gibsons for Building Inspection Services. Turn this over to GM Hall.
Thank you, Chair. Recent BC Building Act changes create a need for local government building authorities to have building officials with qualifications commensurate with the type of buildings they inspect. SCRD and Town of Gibson staff have discussed that an agreement permitting one of SCRD's 3 Level 3 officials to perform services for the town could assist with the town's business continuity, as the town, to staff's knowledge, does not currently have a Level 3 official. The recommendations of this report would authorize the creation of an agreement allowing this. The agreement would be limited to Level 3 services and would have a term of 5 years. Work performed would be cost recovered. The approach here is aligned with the Team Sunshine Coast approach and the strategic priority of working together. And we have our Chief Building Official, Alan Whittleton, in the virtual gallery if there are any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Donna, or Director McMahon, reading the screen, sorry.
Thank you. I'm delighted to see this initiative. It's come up, a number of times over the years. Why don't local governments share building inspectors? So I'm really pleased to see that staff has taken advantage of an opportunity to work together. And I am very pleased to move the recommendations on page 81.
Thank you. I do see a seconder. Director Beamish, I saw your hand.
Yeah, no, I just echo the same comment. I think this is a great example of, again, finding ways to work together to share what is really a challenging time to get the kind of resources that we all need to work with, whether it be in certified resources in building inspection or even our water plants and sewer plants and things of this nature. It really is a challenge for everybody. So I really welcome this and thank you for this initiative and for supporting it.
Thank you, Director Beamish. Director Hiltz.
Yeah, echoing all the the previous statements. I just had one question for the building inspector. Is level 3 the highest level of regulatory licensing for building inspectors?
Yes, it is.
Great, thank you. Director Ties.
Yeah, thank you. And I also just wanted to mention that I'm pleased to hear that we have 3 of them on staff, which gives some redundancy and some reassurance that we will have a level 3 building inspector on staff no matter what. So I think 3 is a great number. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. I don't see it. Director Lee, go ahead. Okay, yeah, microphone, please.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's just a technical question. I was noting the rate that we were charging out, and I was wondering if this was a full recovery, including vehicles and benefits and everything. It seemed low to me, $62, I think it was.
Good question.
Thank you for the question. Yes, that's staff's attempt to come up with a comprehensive figure. We will, of course, monitor it, and if there are issues, we'll work to address it with our partner. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question. Just to clarify, it says A, B, D, E, F, S, I, G, D. Wanted to make sure that that was correct before I call the question on this.
Yes, Chair, those are the participants in our building inspection service.
Okay, thank you very much. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to Annex H, the Corporate Carbon Neutrality Framework. And I believe this is Mr. Shea. Welcome, Mr. Shea.
Thank you, Chair Toth. The strategic plan includes a commitment to take a leadership role on climate change with strategy 4.3 to achieve corporate carbon neutrality. The recommendations in this report comprise the preliminary steps that can be taken to initiate the transition to corporate carbon neutrality and ensuring a livable planet. The report outlines principles, vision, and a mission for a corporate carbon neutrality framework. It provides a scope and structure for following steps that can comprise the components of a plan. And some areas for policy integration are identified as possible short-term steps. And finally, there's a discussion on the SCRD's approach to corporate carbon offsets. Now, staff welcome board direction and are happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. And I see we already have a hand. So go ahead, Director McMahon.
Sure. Very happy to see this coming to the board. Lots of questions. So I believe this does not include the landfill. How is the landfill handled and what's our responsibility for emissions there?
Go ahead.
Thank you for the question. The board strategic plan looked at corporate carbon neutrality in the context of CARIP and landfills, which CARIP looks at traditional service inventories in British Columbia for municipalities and local governments. Landfills fall outside of that boundary, but we are calculating those emissions as part of federal regulatory reporting. And we are considering those emissions in the community energy or the community emissions inventory that is currently underway. We are also looking at the feasibility of mitigating those emissions with phase 2 of the feasibility study for a biocover at the landfill, because they are a material segment of our community's emissions.
Great. Thank you for that. I do see other hands up, so I will move on and then come back to you, Director McMahon. Director Ties.
Yeah, thank you. I see that with the CARIP guidelines, I guess there's a certain framework that you're working with. I'm just wondering, on page 85 in Table 1, I don't see the building and retrofitting infrastructure that's owned by us as part of that list. And I'm wondering if that is sort of shoehorned into one of the other the categories, or if that's something that's ignored.
Good question. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. The traditional service inventory method of looking at boundaries, which makes local governments comparable in BC, looks at services. So all the buildings and infrastructure that would be associated with services such as recreation centers or even the installation or replacement of water mains support those services and are included in the boundary that way.
Okay. Thank you. Just not immediately clear looking at the table. Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to say it was a very interesting report. It's quite comprehensive, and it provided me with additional education, which I liked. But I specifically have a question on page 87. I note that Pender Pool is missing. Does that mean that it's in pretty good shape as far as carbon goes?
Go ahead.
Thanks for the question. Pender Pool is serviced by electricity. The natural gas distribution system on the Sunshine Coast doesn't reach Pender Harbor, and electricity has marginal greenhouse gas emissions in British Columbia compared to natural gas. So all those facilities and all the energy efficiency conservation opportunities are still significant and important to tackle in a broader plan. But this little section here was specifically targeting our main facilities that use fossil fuels, because that's where most of the emissions on our buildings come from.
Great.
Good to see Pender's green.
Thank you very much. Director McMahon.
Yes, good to see Pender being green and surprising. So I just want to look at how we make decisions at the board table about new structure, new infrastructure. So say we're planning to build a water reservoir or a community hall. How do we measure the GHG emissions associated with construction? And what about embedded carbon, especially concrete and insulation? will we be looking at that as part of our decision-making process?
Go ahead.
I think there's various aspects to your question. Part of the framework that's here is the mission statement of integrating this lens, this carbon lens, into all aspects of SCRD operations. As we move forward, how that evolves through policy integration, through specific capacity building on our greenhouse gas accounting capabilities, is yet to be determined. One specific example is with the new business case and project initiation briefs that we utilize operationally. Those considerations are explicitly mentioned in there now. So it is an organizational culture shift that is occurring.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Director Seegers because you haven't asked a question yet, and then I'll come back to Director Ties.
Thank you. On page 88, there is a conversation around the role of carbon offsets. And I think what you're looking for is, is this the direction that you'd like, you'd look to the board actually for direction on, is this the way we should move forward? And specifically, the line I'd point to is under number 4, second last paragraph, last sentence. It says, staff recommend focusing on corporate carbon neutrality plan activities that directly reduce SCRD emissions and create co-benefits, including long-term cost savings. And this is rather than purchasing carbon offsets. And I'd say I would agree with that. I think one of the stands that this board has taken is that the issues that we have are our issues, and we don't want to necessarily put them over onto others. So thank you for putting that forward.
No, that's a very good observation, and yeah, I agree. It's our carbon, it's our emissions. We should be dealing with it, not buying our way out of the problem, so to speak. So, Director Ties?
Yeah, thank you. Regarding that subject, I think one thing we do need to do is do a better job of actually communicating the offsets that we are creating, like the BioCover, to the public, because I don't think that's something that the public's aware of. And the other thing I think is that I think a mix of commercial offsets and locally created offsets would probably be good, because then we could actually have more of a business case for creating local offsets if we're actually paying for it in other ways if we don't do it. So that's my thought on that subject. But so yeah, I think a mix of both would be good. Of course, the more we can do locally, the better. But ultimately, we need to get carbon neutral in the long run. So that's a way that we can do it more quickly and create more of a business case for local offsets as well.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go to Director Beamish and then Director McMahon.
Yeah, I guess where do our shared services like fire hall, libraries, and fall into this? The Gibson's library, for example, is something we all contribute to. The museum, the fire hall, fire equipment. Gibson's fire equipment has just taken possession of a new truck before the end of the year. How do these planning in the long term for these facilities fit into this model?
Go ahead.
Thank you for the question. The fire services that the SCRD oversees are incorporated into the boundary of consideration. The others that you brought up, the library and the museum, are not explicitly supported here or are addressed here. But as outlined in the plan, there's a realm of emissions that the SCRD can influence And those could be, how exactly the SCRD influences them is certainly something that's to be considered, because as was previously mentioned by directors, and all of these emissions need to go down.
Thank you. I'm actually going to follow up on that with, looking at the table 1 on page 85, when you look at arts, recreation, and culture services, fire protection, solid waste, drinking and wastewater, these are all services that are shared amongst both the SCRD electoral areas and the member municipalities. So does the SCRD take sole ownership of emissions on a shared service, or are some of these emissions shared with the district of Sechelt, the town of Gibsons, etc.?
That's thanks for the clarification point. The way CARIP is structured is, should a building be shared in terms of actual use, then those emissions could be shared. But in these cases, since the SCRD is the purveyor of the water system, then all those emissions with the water service are tied to the SCRD's boundary. And I think that's one way of looking at it. So when there are shared services that the SCRD oversees, then they fall within the SCRD's ownership.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, and the emissions that are not within that boundary are addressed in the work that is currently in development on the community side of the equation.
Okay, thank you. Director McMahon.
I had a question in this general area, but I'm just back at the library because we own the building. The SCRD owns the building. And the service is funded through us. So it seems to me logical that it would be ours, but I can see that this could get complicated. My question was, what are the town and the district of Sechelt doing in this area? Like, are we coordinating our approach to carbon neutrality, and are they going to be tracking emissions on a similar basis?
Director Beamish.
I'll be referring a copy of this report to staff and asking that same question. Thank you.
Director Seegers, did you want to answer on behalf of the district?
I think we can do the same thing and bring information back.
Yeah, I don't think we've really had a deep discussion around this. So.
No, we've been focusing on getting staff in positions.
Yeah. Director Ties.
Thank you. Microphone's on. Page 92, the table there, I don't see Field Road on it. Is that another building that doesn't use natural gas and propane?
That's correct.
That's good news and surprising to me. Director McMahon?
Right, small point, but I notice on page 94, last bullet, that we have parks and forest land that have carbon sink potential, which is great. I'm going to be on about floods a lot this week because of all the floods we had. But our parks also are an opportunity to manage stormwater. And I hope when we are looking at our parks that we will look at them through all of the climate change lenses that are available. It's not direct carbon, I don't think, unless Mr. Shea has any other observations on that, but it's an opportunity.
Thank you for that. Mr. Shea, did you want to weigh in on that, or?
There's various aspects there. One of the ways of doing carbon offsets is through avoided deforestation and through various land use approaches. But with regards to the parks and the forest land, there's some management practices that could increase the value on the carbon sequestration basis, and the science is evolving around that. We're all learning what we can do better and informing ourselves as staff as well.
Great, thank you very much. I don't see any other hands up. We do have some recommendations here in this Director Ties.
Yeah, happy to move the recommendations as presented on page 83.
Thank you very much, and I see a seconder for that. I don't see any other hands up. This is voting all, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. All right, and thank you, Mr. Shea. So moving on to Annex I, online accommodation platform funding approval for affordable housing plan. Turn this over to GM Hall.
Thank you, Chair. Earlier this year, following board direction, staff submitted an affordable housing plan for the use of MRDT online accommodation platform funding to Sunshine Coast Tourism for approval by Destination BC. A few weeks ago, confirmation of approval was received. The recommendations of this report incorporate the funding into our financial plan, enabling us to proceed with this work. Thank you.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
I am very happy to move the recommendations on page 96. Our housing situation is dire, and whatever we can do to help, we need to move it forward.
Thank you. I do see a seconder for that. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. And moving on to Annex J, item number 13, Planning and Development Department 2021 Q3 report. Back to GM Hall.
Thank you, Chair. So at the end of every quarter, departments report on their activities, and we have here the Planning and Development Department's third quarter report, and staff are happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Director McMahon, I see your hand up.
Right. Sorry. Now I'm juggling between surfaces. Oh, I have lots of questions. Bylaw 310 on page 100, that's coming up, much anticipated. What's going to be the process for walking the board and the public through this bylaw? It's very complex, and it has a lot of ramifications for the rural areas, so I'm wondering if there is a rollout plan.
Thank you for the question. There will be a rollout plan. That is one of the things that we will have to prepare as we bring this forward. Staff are certainly cognizant that a new zoning bylaw is a major undertaking to walk through. The other comment staff would make is that the direction that staff were provided on this bylaw rewrite was more of the refresh variety. So there was an overall goal to make the bylaw more user-friendly, as well as to address some key areas of pain points where we knew the bylaw wasn't performing. And so although the look and feel will, we hope, be a generation forward from the prior bylaw, it remains largely unchanged from the prior bylaw or current bylaw. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Seegers.
Thank you. I'm on page 102, and you did address this a bit during one of the previous conversations. The last bullet on the page talks about planning and bylaw staff have noticed a steady increase in works done without permits. So given that's the case, you did indicate that, double fees, etc. Are we going to revisit that? Are we finding, are our penalties for doing this sufficient to inhibit the behavior? Maybe not, given what we're seeing. Is that something that's going to come back and be revisited at the board table?
Thank you for the question. At the current time, staff have been directed to review and bring forward recommended improvements to our bylaw enforcement policy, the board's bylaw enforcement policy. And so that work is happening right now. Also, and noted on the same page in the report, work on the development approvals review will be taking place, and that process may well identify opportunities to change our processes, the information we present on our website, and potentially even the back-end enforcement processes that we use as well. So together, those are the current things that staff have been directed to work on. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I'm on page 102. Lots of interesting bullets there, I guess. The Development Approvals Grant, is that the one that we're looking at to look at refining our processes?
Yes, Director. That was it's provided through UBCM and approximately $250,000.
Good news. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, thank you very much for the report. I note that protective services is a new section in the report. It's really nice to see that. I don't think we've had it before, so this is a new thing. It's nice to see it all in one place. So I think this is new.
Yes, it is new. These will be the first quarterly reports that the committee has seen that reflect the reorganized department structure. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Director Ties.
Thank you. Yeah, I like the new structure. I have chatted to a number of firefighters within the Roberts Creek Volunteer Fire Department who are all very much looking forward to the firefighter benefits. So happy to see the RFP has finally been issued. It's been a bit long in coming, but I know that HR has been busy. On another note, under the Sunshine Coast Emergency Program, I did have a conversation with the Roberts Creek Volunteer Fire Department open house with somebody from the seniors planning table, and they suggested that we have a vulnerable persons list for future heat waves, earthquakes, wildfires, and such things, and I think that's a good idea. So I'm wondering what needs to be done to get something like that underway. Thanks.
Good question.
Thank you for the question, and I'm not able to answer that at this time, but if there's direction for staff to look into that, then we would. Thank you.
Director Seegers?
Yeah, I'll just make a comment on that. The director at the hospital meets regularly now with the chair and Mayor of Gibson's, Mayor of Sechelt. I have a meeting with her next week. I could put that down as a comment because their staff would be working with those people typically in the community and see how we could potentially coordinate something like that and bring that back.
Sounds good. Director McMahon.
Thank you. I noted the reference to pain points with Bylaw 310. I don't know what staff's are. I certainly know where mine are. I just had two questions that I don't know whether the Bylaw 310 review would affect this or not. One was about, there was a recent article in the Coast Reporter about a home that was moved into Elphinstone from off coast, and that it noted in that article that they could not move it into either Sechelt or Gibson's because of zoning requirements. And so my question was, is our Bylaw 310 update going to make it impossible for people to move houses here? And the other question I had is, how would we look at doing a system of referrals? We have, Gibson's is very concerned about the aquifer recharge zone. And I think we're all really concerned about the riparian areas, especially on the slopes of the mountain. So is there a way that we can build in a referral to the town of Gibson's for any development applications that have impact on on those.
I think that would be a change in process, but I'll let GM Hall speak to that if he wishes to.
Wow. Okay. Thanks for
Just
those
a,
questions.
Just a little list.
Yeah, there's some substantial things there. On the first part, I think I hear the question and staff take note of it. We'll have to look at that as we continue our work on the zoning bylaw. On the referral question, I can foresee that there would be several ways that we could accomplish that. And I guess if there's, that may be an item to take a look at as part of the development approval process review. There are informal and formal things that could be applied here. And so if through our next steps there remain questions on how we work with our partner local governments on these things, then staff would welcome further direction to do that. I will add that recently the town of Gibson's and Scrd began ongoing regular senior leadership government-to-government meetings aimed at exactly this type of coordination. And over the last 6 months, the level of coordination between managers and senior managers in the local governments seems to have hit a new high on the planning and infrastructure sectors. Thanks.
Thank you. That's great to hear. Just with regards to the relocating structures, I don't think it's a problem with, at least in Sechelt, with our zoning bylaw. It's a problem with our building bylaw. So an update of the zoning bylaw hopefully won't affect that issue. I would assume it's a building bylaw issue in Gibson's, but Director Beamish.
Probably going to be updated similarly.
Microphone, Bill.
One of the things that we had concern about with any old structure coming to the municipality, questions like asbestos removal and stuff like that. We just didn't want to have the problems come and then become a problem in the future, and so that we wanted those kind of certifications. So that and I know that particular case, we had people apply, but then simply walk away from their application because we were asking too much.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Director Lee.
Thank you. I'm back on page 102, and I was noticing the table there and the amount of extra work that's occurred since October of 2020 and into September of 2021. It's over double our historical volumes. One would wonder how you're managing to keep up, and you're actually gaining. So my question is, do we expect those levels to continue, and how are you going to manage those?
Thank you for the question, and staff appreciate the question as an opportunity to dig in a little bit into what kinds of changes our services are experiencing as a result, I think, largely of COVID and changing dynamics in where people want to live, work, and play. It's not unique to planning, but all of the development-related services are seeing an unprecedented, as far as we know, ever, level of demand for service. And it has ebbed and flowed slightly, but it remains quite strong and far beyond what we were seeing in 2019, certainly, or early 2020. And with a credit to all of the staff here and to the understanding of our customers, we are making it work. We have put in place a request tracker system for planning inquiries that has an outgoing message that refers to our current estimated turnaround for response. And we are triaging things to help them move as efficiently as they can forward. But our service levels, they're not set as standards, but our service levels are out into 8 weeks, 10 weeks for some types of services, which is quite a change from before COVID. We continue to look at process improvement opportunities. I think everyone here is really excited internally about the opportunity for a process review. And we'll also be following board direction to bring forward a proposal for how planning could be evolved. And this follows board direction from earlier in the year when we were talking about affordable housing strategies and what it would take to modernize how we do planning while protecting the character that we value on the coast. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Seegers.
I think I've got this down. Okay. Okay. So I also noted the line at the bottom of the page 102 when it talked about, the number of public inquiries and slightly different take on it. How many of these are real estate related, right? Because we have, as we know, there's a lot of real estate happening, and I know in the district of Seashell, we get calls all the time about, can I do this if I buy this property? So how many of those are related that way because those have a sense of urgency and typically will go to the front because of the timing they're involved with? And how many of them are multiple inquiries by the same builder or developer or property owner, right? Because are you doing, you probably can't give me that answer now, but are you looking at what types of calls are coming in too? Because they're going to have to be triaged differently.
Thank you for the question. In a moment, I'll ask Manager of Planning and Development, Dave Patey, to speak to his estimate for the share of inquiries that are real estate related. But the question also provides an opportunity for me to mention that another thing that we are doing or have done and put in place is enhanced self-service options for property information. And I don't have recent analytics, but we did take a look after that was introduced, and it was getting lots of use. And so we know that is, although these numbers are high, we know that because that is being used, they have been reduced somewhat, and we're enabling people to do things on their own time and without the assistance of staff. But perhaps Dave can speak to the types of inquiries that we're seeing. Thanks.
Thanks for the question. And thanks, Ian. You kind of took a part of it by talking a little bit about our self-serve options in order to try to help people help themselves. At this point, we don't really have, through our report tracker system, that level of sophistication to determine the kind of proportionality of inquiries related to real estate inquiries. We know that they can be high, but we also know that realtors quite often call us as a first line of to get to answers, and that's why we've made our self-service options a little bit more robust to try to help that out a little bit. It would maybe be a good further inquiry with our IT department about whether or not we could have the ability through our report tracker system to single out realtors or have a communications memo out to the realty community to submit specific inquiries with a tagline so that we can try to run some stats on the proportion. But at this time, we don't really have those numbers broken down quite with that kind of granularity.
Great. Thank you, Manager Patey, and thank you, GM Hall. Director Ties.
Thank you. I was just looking into Area D, Roberts Creek on page 113. It said there, bridge inspection and tree removal at Woodley Trail, which cued me into, I've heard that Moti is actually trying to connect Woodley and Robinson, and is trying to get the owner of 2772 Lower Road to pay for it as part of the subdivision process. So I'm wondering, how does that work? Does the SCRD get any say in that, considering there is some park infrastructure or some trail infrastructure that we maintain on that right-of-way? Thank you.
Good question. Who would like to take that? GM Hall?
Thank you. Apologies, staff were just conferring as we transitioned from the planning and development report to the community services report. So
sorry.
Between the two of us,
my apologies.
Trying to get aligned, didn't.
Can't go there yet.
We weren't following the question. I apologize.
Consider that advance notice of the question when we get there. Director Ties, do you have another question, or can I move on to the speakers list?
No.
Okay. Director Hiltz.
3. Well, this question is almost at the next section, right? So it's at the very last page. It's the Gibson's Tower. So I'm just looking for a little refresher. Is we have the tower on the Gibson's Fire Hall. Gear is going to be relocated. Does the existing tower stay, or I can't remember what stays, what goes, and what's the end? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. With apologies, I can only offer a partial answer that my understanding of the Gibson's Tower project is it involves the relocation of equipment from the fire hall to the Telus building. And the piece that I am unfortunately not able to answer is what is the end and what happens post equipment move. But staff can follow up with project information. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Lee.
Thank you. I'm on page 107, a little bit behind, I guess, seeing someone had moved to the end. Under the Sunshine Coast Emergency Program, it says 2 grant applications are being developed to fund evacuation planning. I sure hope they're successful because my community has been asking for that for quite a while. But I also was curious if perhaps Director Ty's earlier question would fit into that one, that study.
Sorry, can you clarify, Director Lee?
Well, evacuation planning could be medical, could be whatever whatever emergency
vulnerable
is.
Persons, you mean?
And so Director Ties was asking a question about a list of vulnerable people that should be attended to in a case of emergency.
I think if I'm correct, the evacuation planning is for 2 very specific areas. I believe one of them is Aquatic, actually. I think this is what we saw at council last night, but GM Hall?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the questions. And I guess this is a bit of a teaser because you will see at some point a report coming forward about this grant. It's through the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund, and it's a deep dive on a geographically specific area. And I know staff have been working closely with our counterparts at District of Sechelt on a coordinated approach. But we will be bringing forward a report with information about the scope, and ultimately we will need a resolution of support if indeed the board is wanting the application to proceed. But work is underway now because the application is due at some point in November. Thank you.
Thank you. Follow up, Director Lee?
Same section, but a different one.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. A SCEP planning meeting held on September 29th. I was wondering what that was with who and what it was about.
Thank you. So the Sunshine Coast Emergency Program, or acronym SCEP, is a service of the regional district, and there are approximately monthly coordinating meetings with all program partners. And I won't remember them all, but they generally involve other local governments, other emergency service providers such as BC Wildfire Service, social service providers such as Salvation Army, utility providers such as Fortis, and it's an opportunity to update on key issues and build capacity in the program. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Seegers.
Same section. The new mass communication system, exciting to see that come forward. It's something that the community has really asked for a long time. So it'd be nice to see that coming out. And also with regards to the hiring of the 2 Fire Smart coordinators. I note the posting's closed, so we still have to hire them. But I know our community forest has been really anxious to get moving forward on this so that we can look at protecting our community from, devastating effects of potential forest fires here. This past summer when it was so dry, there was a lot of concern and we were hearing a lot about that. So it'd be nice to see this going forward.
Thank you. I'm actually going to follow up on the mass communication system with a question. I don't recall if we've had the answer offhand. There's a couple of big names in mass communications, at least here in BC. Are we going with one of their systems, or are we going with something custom built? Do we know?
Thank you. We're working with Voyant Alert.
That was the one I was hoping for. I just couldn't remember their name, so thank you for that. All right. I don't see any other hands up, so let's move on to Annex K, Community Services Department 2021 Q3 report, and we'll go to Director Ties first.
Maybe Shelley wants to do an introduction. GM Gagnon, sorry.
Certainly, good morning. Thank you very much. Just introducing the report, I want to acknowledge the amount of time and effort that goes into these reports from staff and their work to pull together summaries of what's happened over the past 3 months, which oftentimes is quite difficult because time passes and before you know it, you're trying to remember what you did last week, let alone 3 months ago. So with that, I am open to any questions. And Director Ties, if you could please repeat your question for me, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
With pleasure. I heard from concerned neighbors that the Ministry of Transportation Infrastructure is planning on connecting Woodley to Robinson Road, and there is some parks infrastructure, mostly in a walking trail, that is along that right-of-way. So I'm wondering if the SCRD is in any way consulted or involved in those plans, and whether we even get notified of them.
Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you for the question. Typically what happens through a development permit, if there are, through that application, if there are impacts or perceived impacts to parks, then those are referred to us and we're able to comment at that time. But in terms of this specific one, we are not aware of any application coming in or of that change. So I have unfortunately no comment to make on that.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
Thank you. This last weekend, there was dramatic photos and footage of flooding on Chester Creek and the little footbridge going over to Chester House. So lots of people have asked me, how is Chester House?
Thank you for the question, Director McMahon. I'd actually like to call on Manager Clarkson or Superintendent Clarkson to perhaps answer that because he was on scene and taking pictures himself. So if he would please answer the question, that'd be great. Thank you.
Welcome, Mr. Clarkson.
Thank you very much through the chair, and thank you, GM and Director McMahon. Yes, and you are correct. To a certain degree, it actually wasn't myself. It was Acting Parks Operations Coordinator Dan Platt, who was on site. Assessing the creek overflow and the potential flooding to Chester Park and the community hall property. I think everything's safe. There's still lots of high water and we need some engineering help to assess any potential damages once the water goes down. However, the property has been closed off for safety and risk management measures for the time. And by the end of the week, once the water recedes, we should have an update. But so far, so good. The flooding system in the basement adjacent to the creek is working well, and there appears to be no visible damage to the top portion of the creek where we can see. Thank you.
Good news. Thank you very much. Director Lee.
Oh, thank you. It's a rather mundane question after that one. I'm on page 110, and the building maintenance is constructing an office space and shop at the Sunshine Coast Arena. It kind of caught my attention. Is that going to be a permanent office space for them? In other words, will they live there, start and stop there?
Thank you for the question. So how this sort of came about was building maintenance didn't have a reasonable touchdown space to do any of their prefabrication work or any of their shop work. And so that's sort of how it started in the development of a shop area, an area that they could go and build and do some of their tasks in a safe and appropriate environment. And there is a little station there where they can touch down, have access to a computer. And so they will be in and out of that area, but they also are in and out of Mason Yards as well as Field Road here at the touchdown stations as well. So it is a place that they can certainly go to and work out of, but they're on the road more than anything and have multiple touchdown areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Seegers.
Thank you. On pages 120 and 121, we're talking about lifeguards. And I note on 121, it indicates that there was a shortage of lifeguards and the Pender Pool had to cut back on their hours. Then on page 120, it talks about in July having this recertification and an instructor course. So is this in any way going to address the shortage, or are we going to continue to do this to ensure that we have sufficient lifeguards for our pools?
Thank you, Director Seegers. There is a shortage of lifeguards throughout the entire country. And what happened was during COVID, when everything closed, certification has to be renewed on an ongoing basis. And so there was a lot of certification that just expired and many people chose not to renew. It is a very lengthy and somewhat costly process. So it is something that is being experienced across the country, unfortunately, and we're no exception to that either. So training and recruitment is an ongoing effort here and something we've actually been having lots of conversation about, some out-of-box thinking, maybe some videos of how we can promote. We certainly have our junior lifeguard club, and that's a way of attracting at a young age and trying to bring them into the field. There will be ongoing lifeguard in-service training. We actually have one that we're looking at coming up here. And we are still experiencing shortages. So it is something that we are spending a lot of time trying to attract, recruit, and retain. And so unfortunately, it's an ongoing issue, and hopefully at some point in the future, we might see it resolved, but across the country, unfortunately.
So have we considered potentially financially supporting some of the members who would like to take it, but maybe just can't or don't have the financial resources at this point? Maybe subsidize some of the training for a period of time so that we could up our numbers? Is that something that is considered or possible to be considered?
Thank you, Director Seegers. It is actually something we consider across the organization as we face these shortages of staff and certified staff and how we might think differently. So that is absolutely something that, depending on the circumstance, staff are willing to entertain, and just, we certainly need to do things differently. So thank you for the question.
Thank you. I'm going to jump to Director Beamish first because he hasn't asked a question in this section yet, and then we'll come back to Director McMahon.
Thank you. I'm on page 118, I believe it is, with the Gibson's district aquatic facility. Two things about that. One, I note a significant increase over 2019 Q3 of a 10% jump in that, which is great to see. It's being well used and is an important facility for our community. And I think as staff are aware that one of our councillors is very concerned with the addition of another building or opportunity to that facility. And is anything happening on that? This is to have kind of a recreation space attached to that facility or adjoining it or nearby.
Thank you for the question, and we too were very pleased to see participation rates increase at the Gibsons and District Aquatic Facility. Of course, we had extended our hours there to accommodate for the closure of the Seashell Aquatic Centre. So we think obviously that's part of that, but we were pleased to be able to do so and to work together to continue with the provision of aquatic services. In terms of your question around the idea for a separate building or an addition to the building, there have been conversations administration to administration, and that really resides with the town of Gibsons to have the conversation since they are the holders in trust. And to make and bring forward any formal recommendations that they want to the SCRD. And to date, we have not received anything formal, just had those informal conversations.
Okay, I believe there was a recommendation or a resolution from council earlier this year or last year asking for something. So I'll revisit that through our administrator. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Beamish. Director McMahon.
I was absolutely delighted to find this sentence on page 118, that the weight room has anecdotally experienced a steady increase in participation. That is accidentally correct because the vaccine antidote has has created more activity at the center. My question about parks is kind of a long-term question, but are we looking at developing management plans for some of the larger parks?
Thank you for the question. At this point in time, capacity is quite limited. We are currently short-staffed and recruiting, which is a good thing. I also would like to take the opportunity, as I have said before, that across the country, the statistics are showing an increased pressure in use on parks during COVID, and we don't anticipate that to change. And so we have seen use increase in some studies up to 150%, which is causing stress on us to be able to maintain current service levels, let alone explore management plans and some of those really important planning documents to help identify clearly service levels and changes or improvements that we want to make to our current park systems. So there are a few different requests that you may see surface in the budget 2022. But at this point in time on this current work plan, we do not have any management plans on it.
Thank you. Director Lee.
Yes, I'm on page 113, and it's investigation and closure of non-sanctioned informal trail at John Daly Park and submissions of a natural resource violation complaint with the province's compliance and enforcement branch. I'd be interested what the trail was for and who made it. And secondly, it seems to indicate we put the violations complaint in, and I was wondering if that was correct or if I've read that wrong.
Thank you for the question, and I will, in just 1 minute, turn it over to Superintendent Clarkson to answer the specifics, perhaps, around this trail. But I will take the opportunity to say that we probably all know that informal trails are constructed all the time, some of which we stumble across and some of which we don't, some of which are constructed to a minimal standard and some of which are not. And although it seems to be a fairly simple thing, quote unquote, to construct a trail, it is in fact quite complex to construct a good, safe, long-standing trail. But with that, I will turn it over to Superintendent Clarkson to perhaps answer the specifics around this trail at John Daly.
Yeah, thank you very much. And through the chair, I appreciate the comments, Director Lee and GM Gagnon. This specific trail in particular was noted by members of the community while visiting the park. And over the course of a few weeks, they saw it rapidly develop. So if you're familiar with John Daly Park, there's a important wetland adjacent to the property, running through the property, and the creek that runs into and adjacent to the park is an important salmon-bearing watershed. So staff received a report through our General Parks Administration Office that there was a trail being constructed. We went out and inspected and actually determined that it wasn't built to standard. It was actually, the way that it was engineered and constructed was threatening the environmental sustainability of the area. So we've actually got a legal obligation to report any natural resource violations on Crown land or parkland as such when we discover them as a land management authority, and that's the typical process we take. This situation was similar, and we have not yet heard anything back from the province's Compliance and Enforcement Branch. Thank you.
Follow up, Director Lee.
Yes, thank you. I was quite aware of the sensitive nature there, so I'm actually hopeful that this trail will be shut down. It'll stay shut down. Normally I'm the other way around, saying we need trails, let's put them in, but not in John Daly Park. That's a pretty sensitive environment there, so thank you for attending to it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Tice.
Thank you. Yeah, page 122, conventional transit ridership by month. I'm seeing we're just over 50% of historical volumes. I've also heard of staff shortages, lots of overtime. So I'm going to ask a question that may be slightly unpopular, but are we providing too much service?
Thank you for the question and the opportunity to speak to that. My answer would be I don't believe that we're providing too much service. I think we are in a very unique time. And it's probably a natural, sort of the perfect storm, where we have a pandemic that causes trepidation, illness, perception of, that caused people to rethink their own personal lives, early retirements, changes in their vocations. So we definitely have a shortage of drivers, and we are not the only industry that has a shortage of drivers, as we're painfully aware of. And then, you just couple that with sort of living on the coast and trying to attract people here in terms of our housing situation and such. It's been a challenge, but I have to extend commendations again to our staff in transit, both our Superintendent Sears and our Manager Walton. Their recruitment efforts over the past 6 months have been commendable, if not valiant. And we actually currently now on staff, and within 3 weeks we'll have fully qualified and ready to start and take their solo shift, more drivers than we've ever had. One of our challenges is that some of those drivers, their availability is fairly limited. But with this recent addition, I believe they're adding almost 6 drivers. With that recent addition, they are starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And so we have had conversations about the challenges that we're in and how we can see our way out of them. And as recent as yesterday with BC Transit, and there's a general feeling of confidence that we are finding our way. And I'm sure that in the new year we'll see attrition as well. It's a natural process, but the recruitment that they've done and the drivers that we've been able to get, and just the way the team itself has pulled together, I also should extend my thank yous to our transit staff in totality. They have really banded together to see themselves through quite a long and tiresome process. So thanks to them, I think we are on our way out of a very difficult situation. And I would say that we are, if anything, not wanting to, we want to do anything we can not to change our service levels, because we're just getting to a place where those service levels are meeting the needs, and and wanting to just getting our ridership back and build confidence back with our ridership. And as soon as you start to make changes to service, that only complicates the issue further. But I do appreciate the question and the opportunity to just provide some details of where we're headed. So thank you.
Thank you. I turn it over to Director Hiltz.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm going to continue on this unique time. And let me just get, it was at the beginning of the COVID-19 all facilities. And if you could just, it's the challenge to staff. So what I'm trying to kind of understand how the public is kind of interacting with staff and the role of the vaccine passports and increased confidence, transit in our public areas. You could just expand on that and how staff is managing, how the public sees it, leading to the increased participation rates. Just sort of general stuff. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much for the question. So I'm very excited to welcome the public back and most recently welcome spectators back. And so we are taking extra measures, as we have been all through COVID when we've been open, to ensure that our facilities our facilities and our fleet are clean and sanitized, and that we have the processes in place to provide a safe and welcoming environment for our public. So I'm very pleased to see the public coming back. I think their confidence in that is really a personal and individual perspective. And so we see some people quite keen to be back in the facilities and be back in the facilities without masks or with masks, it doesn't matter. We see some people that are feeling and making life changes that maybe don't necessarily want to participate in the same ways that they did before. We, based on our spectator numbers, have very keen spectators, probably parents, in many cases, that are very keen and hungry to be back in and watching the participants. The interactions with staff have been varied, and that, of course, comes with the varied opinion on the vaccinations and the provincial restrictions that are in place. And again, that's very individualized, but I believe that our staff continue to deal with it in a most professional manner and try to focus on customer service and customer safety. And I believe for the most part, the public feels the same way. Thank you.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
Yeah, I just had a couple of transit-related questions. The first one is that the absolute ridership numbers don't necessarily tell the story of how ridership patterns may have changed and continue to change because of so many people working at home, for instance. So it would be interesting to take a look at that at some point in terms of decision-making in the future. And I was just a little surprised that the custom transit ridership has dropped so much, because I've always had the impression that a lot of the people using that service need it for very basic, important stuff like doctor visits. So I'm surprised that the demand has decreased that much, and I was just wondering if there were any comments from staff on that.
Thank you, through the chair to Director McMahon. I'll take the first part, and then I will turn it over to Manager Walton for the second part. In terms of patterns of ridership, that is a great point. I think we've had several discussions now about the different statistics and data-based decision-making that we need to consider as we look at our ridership. So we've been having those conversations with BC Transit, and they certainly have the expertise on staff to be able to bring that information forward. So I anticipate that as we begin to explore and bring our Transit Future Action Plan to the forefront, that we will be considering that information in our decision making. And with that, I will turn it over to Manager Walton to perhaps address your question of ridership related to our custom transit. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the question, Director McMahon. When it comes to the custom transit, you sort of touched on it already. Doctor's appointments is a big one, but a lot of doctor's appointments these days are being done via Zoom or online, so that's taken away quite a chunk of passengers there. And daily adult programs through the Seniors Centre in Schwuncliffe have not begun again yet because of COVID, and that's where a lot of our day-to-day use was before COVID started. So just those two paired up alone take away a significant amount of daily usage, and coupled with potential fears from seniors taking transit during the COVID times, may have people staying at home.
Thank you. Director Seegers.
Thank you. On page 126, it references the Transit Future Action Plan. And I know that community consultation has completed. Do we have a timeline about when information will be starting to come back to us on this?
Thank you for your question. You are correct. Public participation and that engagement process has wrapped up, and BC Transit is busy compiling the results from that. At this point in time, I'm anticipating getting an invitation to our project steering committee meeting when BC Transit has their results together, so that we can begin the conversation around what that looks like. We have, I think, earmarked Manager Walton and I that we anticipate in Q1 that information will start coming back to the board as it relates to that Transit Future Action Plan updates. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Lee.
Thank you. I'm back on page 114. It was a curiosity here, a meeting with the Ruby Lake Landowners Association regarding ongoing access and safety challenges at Ramp Road Boat Launch. I was just wondering how that went and if there was any results from the meeting.
I will turn that right over to, I will turn that right over to Superintendent Clarkson, because he was the one that was meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And through the chair, thanks for the question, Director Lee. And it was more of an update meeting. The Ruby Lake Landholders Association is still experiencing some challenges with the only access at Ruby Lake, which is also managed through parks and delivered as a recreational boat access service. So that being said, we met and we had a very amicable conversation, discussed some options moving forward, and maybe the potential for some community-led initiatives as we proceed to next operating season. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I don't see any other hands up, so I think we will move on. Thank you very much for the Community Services Q3 report. And we'll move on. Annex L, new ActiveNet software contract. We'll turn it back over to Ms. Gagnon.
Thank you. I just want to take this opportunity to acknowledge and thank Manager Don and his staff for recognizing and following up on an opportunity to make change that is a positive one. I also want to note that the research and potential to migrate to new software, which we will be looking at over the next 3 years when we retender, is a significant undertaking, having just come through it in my previous work, as well as Manager Don in his previous work. And so it will be that will be reflected in our 2023 work plan. It's a very large corporate impact to that as well. So exciting opportunity, and very pleased to see this come forward, and happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Director Seegers.
Thank you. One of the conversations that has arisen a number of times on the Sunshine Coast is harmonized booking. So not just of facilities, but fields for sports teams, for example. Right now, they have to book with the District of Sechelt, the Regional District, Town of Gibson's, School District, etc. Is that part of the conversation that we'd be looking at going forward in putting together some kind of package for booking?
Thank you for the question. It's an interesting one that I've asked myself when I came here. It really isn't reflective in the software, because any software can do that. It's really around the partnership discussions. So it's been flagged on a very large list. I think I'm going into month 4 and my list seems to get bigger and bigger. But certainly we actually have a meeting scheduled with the school district I have a list of things I just want to talk about and explore and opportunities. So I think there absolutely could be some efficiencies and probably good customer service that might come out of a discussion around shared resources that way. And I know there's lots of things I need to remember that I'm not so clear on with the regional district piece of it that I'm sure my CFO will remind me of. But it is on our radar. It unfortunately isn't one of our priorities at the moment, but certainly aware it could be something that would be worthwhile in future work plans to consider. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to start an intergovernmental meeting list, and this could be one of them that could go on there. Thank you.
Yeah, we had a topic last night at our council meeting for intergovernmental meeting, so that one was step 2, building code. Director Ties.
Yes, thank you. The hall rental process continues to be onerous and fairly inefficient. I'm just wondering if there's if this changes anything, or if there is something with the update of the website that's going to make that more efficient and better. I guess my question is there a light at the end of the tunnel? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Again, probably not a software-related question, because the software is really just about the actual booking of the facility and the scheduling of that. It's really around processes. So I note that we've received several comments about our hall rental process, and I do know that recreation staff have been spending some time in trying to streamline those processes, make them a bit more user-friendly, use the website and some of the updates, and some of that work has occurred over the past month and a half. So I'm not sure if your concerns are still quite recent in nature, or if they maybe are still being surfaced from this past summer. In the report itself, in the quarterly report, you would have noted some processes related to the insurance that have been streamlined further, which was also one of the problems, or seemingly the challenges this past summer. So we are aware of it. We continue to listen to feedback from the community and try to change and streamline our processes as much as possible. I'll also take this opportunity to just plant the seed that currently the support that recreation provides our parks area in the rental and bookings of sports fields, halls, etc., is done with historical hours provided that were quite minimal. And finding over the past 3 years that it's becoming quite significant in its nature. And the other thing that tends to happen when you have one service doing a service on behalf of another service is nobody really sort of takes ownership of that. And so welcome GM Gagnon to making some changes around that, and staff have been great. They are working together and trying to streamline things better with that respect. But you may see things on our work plan that come forward related to that in 2022. Thank you.
Thank you. Director McMahon?
Yes, I just wanted to follow up on that there may be an opportunity down the road here for shared booking, or, to sell our services to other local governments, or assuming that we get the whole rental thing ironed out adequately. There are a lot of facilities on the Sunshine Coast that you can rent, but just try and find out how. It's crazy. Like, if you want to rent the Kinsman Hall, I think it is, you go into the auto parts store. Who's supposed to know this? So if we had any kind of a platform that would be a one-stop shop for people on the Sunshine Coast, it would be a great boon, particularly to newcomers.
Thank you for that. Director Beamish?
During the pandemic, for the past 2 years, actually, I've been a frequent user of the fitness center, the recreation in Gibson's. It was a little bit onerous to register for space, for time there. But now that we're not doing that anymore, I see almost too many people in the facility coming. And other times, almost nobody. And I wonder if going back to a registration process would level out those times and make it more better experience for everybody. I mean, there's been times where my wife and I are the only ones in there, and I say, we've got all this equipment and just 2 of us. Times like last night, I think almost felt like there was 20 people in there. and you're waiting for machines. And just leveling that experience out during the course of the day or the evening. Is there any thought to going back to registering for the times?
Thank you for the question, and I appreciate your perspective. I think you probably just gave staff a minor heart attack by saying that. It is an extremely onerous process that you're talking about, and one that is actually, in my experience, not shared by the majority of people. The drop-in aspect of recreation is a critical piece of recreation. If people want to register for a program at a specific time, they do so, but in most cases, people want the flexibility of being able to come whenever they want. And so you do see those ebbs and flows in customer uptake in different times. And so what staff try to do is actually program those quieter times to get more people in the facility, or offer different types of services to be able to create those leveling offs, as you say. But I think we certainly have not had, we had more complaints about having to register for drop-in, quote unquote. And when the floodgates opened up, there was a huge sigh of relief. So it's an interesting perspective, and I thank you for it. And perhaps if we heard from the community at large that they wanted something different, then that would be the time to consider it. But thank you.
I think I can't tell when I'm in the facility, when I see people come with their equipment and leave again, whether they're being turned away because of the number of people who are already in there. So I don't know if that's happening. But certainly it was onerous to begin with, but then it became routine. And I think that was the difference. So.
Thank you. I will suggest, to my knowledge, I've not heard of people being turned away from our weight room. I know that we certainly have that experience sometimes in our natatoriums, in our pools, but that's mainly due to lifeguard capacity. But I appreciate the comment, and certainly our manager of recreation's on the call as well and has heard the information, and we can certainly consider that in our thinking. Thank you.
And it is a great facility. Thank you.
Thank you. Getting us back to the software contract here, Director Seegers.
Yes, I'd like to move the recommendations on page 128.
Thank you. I have a seconder. I don't see any other hands up. This is voting BDEF, District of Sechelt, Town of Gibsons, and SIGD. No, my apologies. It's voting all. I'm already on the next item, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. Just before we start going into facilities, capital funding, and asset management and what have you, I have had a request for just a couple-minute break. So we're going to take just a 5-minute break, and we'll see you all back at noon. Thank you, and welcome back, everybody, to the Planning and Community Development Committee for October 21st, 2021. Moving on in our agenda to Annex M, we have the 2021 Community Recreation Facilities Capital Funding Review. And I turn this over to Manager Doyle, I believe.
Thank you, Chair. This report summarizes the results of the annual Community Recreation Facilities Capital Plan Review and provides recommendations for resuming sustainable funding for critical capital components at the 4 recreation facilities within the community recreation function. If there's any questions, staff's available to take them at this time.
Thank you very much. I see Director McMahon's hand up already, so I'll go to her.
Sure, I'll start at the top. What is a brine chiller and why do we need one when the rec center is less than 20 years old?
Go ahead.
Thank you for the question. That is an essential component to the plant in the ice rink. And those components have an average life of about 10 years. So they are a regularly replaced item. Thank you.
I'll ask a quick follow-up. Is this the first replacement of the brine chiller?
Well, considering I have 4 months here, I actually, I don't know the answer to that. So I'll look to perhaps Manager Doyle knows it, or we do have Interim Manager Van Velzen in the audience as well. Perhaps one of them can speak to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Doyle.
I'll defer to Mr. Van Velzen. He's much more.
Thank you for the question. Yes, this is the first life cycle replacement of the brine chiller in the Gibson's Community Center.
Okay, thank you very much. Director Ties, we'll go to you. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm not going to answer what a brine chiller is. I thought that's what you were asking me to do. No, I'm wondering, in the past, I think it was Director McMahon that has asked whether we could get a report stating the annual cost to run one of the facilities. And I think this would be an appropriate place to kind of see how it all stacks up. I know we have a sort of a 30,000-foot view here of all the facilities, but it'd be nice to actually know how it goes, how it trickles down per facility. But as a, just to keep the business moving forward, I would be a proponent of Model 2. That is a more of a consistent funding model and does not push the buck forward. It means that with a more immediate increase in the funding model rather than a delayed one. Thank you.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
Right, here I go on my favorite topic, but I appreciate that there is a capital budget deficit, but given that we have no strategic plan for the future of these facilities, and we have no financial reporting on the facilities individually, I'm very reluctant to commit more to capital reserves. We are facing huge costs for water and solid waste, and I think we need to set priorities, not just keep funding everything automatically. We may need to ask ourselves whether we can really afford to continue to operate 3 swimming pools and 2 ice rinks for a population of 30,000 people. I'd also be interested in whether staff have considered a condition assessment of the Seashell pool. That building has had nothing but expensive capital repairs since it opened, and I would be interested in knowing what it's cost us so far and what we are looking at in the long run of the condition of that facility. Thanks.
Thank you. And I believe the question in there was, have we looked at a facility condition assessment for the Seashelt Aquatic Center? To my understanding, we have not. I believe the resolution that it's actually in the next report, the facilities chosen for that condition assessment were the Seashelt and Community Arena and the Gibsons and Districts Aquatic Facility. I'm not sure. I will have to defer to perhaps the experts, and maybe we'll have to come back at a future meeting. I'm not sure that we require a facility condition index on the Seashelt Aquatic Center because it's new. Usually you do those sort of assessments on older facilities, but I could be wrong there, and Manager Doyle might know more. But to answer the question, it is not in our plan at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think Director McMahon would be happy to educate you offline as to the various condition issues that have occurred at the Seashell Aquatic Center. Director Seegers?
Thank you. This is a historical kind of thing. One of my sons actually worked in building community facilities at the time when salt water was suggested for pools. We're not the only ones who had issues with salt water and what happened with our facilities. Many of the facilities that actually put salt water in place of chlorinated water at the time had to go back and retrofit because the infrastructure did not support the pitting that happened from the salt water at the time. They've successfully all been remediated, but it was an issue not just locally. So we've got to kind of keep that context in mind around that. The question I have, I agree with Director McMahon, and I think that's why we asked about the condition assessment on the two facilities that we're looking at. We do need to be fiscally responsible with the cost of recreation facilities on the coast. What I'd like to have staff address is the 3 different options for financing within this report. I'm not totally clear about this. I think probably our Chief Financial Officer could give some more clarity. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll see. Ms. Perot, are you going to speak to this? Okay.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So included in the report here, there is a recommended course of financial action for at least 2022, noting that we do have subsequent reports and further types of things such as the large debts coming offline for the 2 newer facilities in 2026. 2025 and 2026, which have been mentioned in prior staff reports. So the motion here is reflective of option 1 for the funding strategy for the time being, noting that we still have a lot of things in flux. So that's the recommended funding strategy for now. It's not to say that when those debts fall off, but it definitely means that there is, from a financially sustainable side of the house, there's a significant over 1.6 million that will no longer be there. Not knowing the fate of kind of where we're going to go with community recreation, that's been noted, sort of some planning in some of these 2 reports here. So that's kind of why those 2 reports are paired together on the same agenda, is I think they somewhat are correlated and bring some narrative to the picture. So I think that's what staff are recommending right now. It's not to say there is some hazard, recognizing that we're still funding just critical items and that we're still bringing forward budget requests to fund different items. So I think for now we feel comfortable with this recommendation, knowing that obviously this discussion will happen ongoing.
Go ahead.
I guess part of what I'd like to see happen is we do need to cover up some of those other items. We do need to do that. The other piece is we're going into an election next fall. And so whatever we put in place now, we're going to have a new board coming forward and having to grapple with this at the next budget, which will be starting probably during this term. Is there a way to potentially look at maybe a 2-year plan so that that conversation, they would actually have time to have that conversation after the budget's been put to bed to deal with all of the other ongoing pieces?
So what could occur, and internally we're reviewing timelines for when we review this plan. What's happened over the last couple of years since COVID, really 18 months, almost 2 years now, is that due to the deferral of the capital funding to cover off COVID, I think irregularity or unstable market conditions, so quotes coming in significantly higher, our commodities market, our workforce market, labor market, those types of things. So not knowing the crystal ball as to are we going to continue to experience these types of things, because financial indicators see that there might be a stabilization of it, but we don't know on the Sunshine Coast. Sometimes we're delayed. So I think what we could do is we could make a motion to bring the capital report forward a little bit sooner than next year, because this report does come annually to inform the budgeting discussions. So we could bring that forward at a July committee meeting to make a further decision. Once we have, I think, a little more information on some of these bigger projects and what they're going to come in as, I think we can be a little more informed on what we would advise going forward. We could also bring forward some sort of motion that the board make a policy decision to use those debt fundings in the future to fund some of the shortfalls, because we haven't been explicit in wanting that direction. We've kind of put it out there as an option, but we don't have a formal resolution to that effect. So that could be an option, is for July before the election. We're still ongoing in business, so we could do that.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
Oh, I forgot I was on I had my hand up. Well, in that case, I'll make a motion.
Go for it.
I would like to move the recommendations on page 130.
Okay. And I will second that. Any other comments, questions, considerations? Director McMahon, I still see your hand up. Sorry, CFO Perot.
Yeah, thank you. So I just wanted to ask whether or not there was any further consideration that an explicit motion on bringing the capital renewal plan to the July prior to the 2023 financial plan to review the capital plan on funding strategies.
I see a head nod from that side of the table, but I think we'll deal with the motion that's on the floor first and then pass a separate motion for that, or try for a separate motion for that, if that works for staff. So, okay. I don't see any other hands up, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. That's carried. Director Seegers.
Yes, I'll make that motion that Tina just said. It'll be recorded, so I think staff will have that. Basically, that the information will come forward in July for the board's information and for direction at that point.
Perfect. Do I have a seconder for that? Seconded. Thank you. I don't see any hands up. Don't see anybody jumping in a microphone, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. That's carried. All right. Thank you for that one, Mr. Doyle. Moving on to Annex N, Recreation Facility Life Cycle Assessment Report Summary. Back to you, Manager Doyle.
Thank you, Chair. This report summarizes our consultants' detailed life cycle assessments completed for both the Gibson's and District Aquatic Facility and the Sunshine Coast Arena. And again, staff are available to answer any questions that may be.
Thank you. I see that there are no recommendations that need to be passed out of this, so it is just for information. Director McMahon.
Right. So, interesting reports, and I would say cautiously good news about the Gibson's pool. Seems to be, hanging in there. Neither, on page 140, it says neither report provided the specific end-of-life timing that was sought through the original budget proposal. So that kind of begs the bigger question of where we're going with the recreation facilities. So what's the next step in this process?
Thank you for the question. I will suggest in my experience, I'm not sure of an engineer that's ever put their stamp to giving the crystal ball as to when the end of life happens for a facility. This is the type of information that they can quantitatively supply, and then you have to consider many other things as you look at your facilities. So the question that you asked is, what is the next step? And I do think that that is somewhat outlined in the report, in that most likely you'll see in work plans for 2023, we probably need to start thinking about a community recreation needs assessment study that does look at the future of facilities and community recreation on the coast. And that would feed into planning. This information feeds into planning. We've got leases that we need to talk about and how that feeds into planning. So those are all things that have been identified. Staff are very aware of them. And, you know, until we have that plan, we're trying to be diligent, but also good stewards of the facilities that we have, and making sure that we are taking care of them, but not necessarily going overboard in that care, but the continuation of the service level that we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Ties.
Yeah, mentioning next steps, and sort of in continuation with what Director McMahon has started, I do think that this needs to be a discussion with the public within the greater context of future asset management expenditures, not just in recreation, because this is just a slice of the pie. And at some point, that pie becomes too big for the public to eat. If we're going to go with that metaphor. So yeah, I think ultimately the question is, where do we draw the line? You know, do we say, well, in 10 years we either are going to start building new facilities or get rid of the old ones, or do we pass that decision on to the next board? And you know, where that's led us before. You know, something like that does need a good amount of lead time to actually consider. So I do think we need to go to the public, and especially as we get more knowledge around our asset management implications, and let people know, hey, this is the future cost of running everything that we're running right now, and I don't think we have a grasp of that right now, and but we will, I think as we start figuring out our asset management a little bit more. So yeah, that's just my comment. I think there needs to be a larger dialogue that needs to be had with the whole community.
Thank you. Director Seegers.
Thank you. On page 141, I think. Hang on. I think I'm a little past that. No. 142, sorry. Yes, it talks about timelines for next steps. It says within the next 5 years it would be beneficial to do this. But then I go down to the conclusion where it says, the last sentence in the first paragraph, it says, for the Sunshine Coast Arena, there's more than 25% of the CRV in projects identified within the next 5 years. So I think 5 years is too long a time frame to actually address this. If we're going to start getting into major expenditures on these buildings, we need to accelerate that timeline so that we don't take, you know, community money and invest it in these facilities where there's a decision 2 years later that, no, we're not going to have these facilities move on. So I think the timeline, this is something that we've started like 10 years ago, and all of this work probably should have been done within the last 10 years. It has not been, and I don't think we've got a lot of time again in this, you know, this state to do this. And it also ties into Director McMahon's questions and comments about what does the community want with regards to these. We have very vocal minority who come forward all the time whenever we talk about doing anything with recreation. We need to make sure we engage the greater community on this. We've had a lot of turnover in the community in the last while, a lot of younger families moving in. Where they're sitting right now with regards to this might be at a different place than some of the others who are on the other end of the, life cycle spectrum kind of thing. But again, 5 years I think is too far out. We need to get ahead of this. We need to get on top of this. It's very costly, not only for the information, the costs that they've identified in here, but the other costs that are not necessarily identified, the ongoing maintenance, the costs of heating and cooling and all of those kinds of things that continue to go up, particularly in the older facilities. So that's my perspective.
Thank you for that. Director Beamish, I'm just in the midst of switching computers here, so I might disappear and then reconnect. So go ahead, Director Beamish.
Yeah, thank you for this report. There's a lot of information here, and I'm going to refer this as well to our staff and council because I think it's something they need to be aware of for information. I don't know how we bring it back and discuss it all together outside of this small room. I think it is important that we find a way to do that. I know that, for example, I suspect the demographic profile of our different facilities is different. Gibson's pool, I suspect, has a much older demographic in use of it than perhaps the Seashell pool. And it's important, I know, to our community when it was not available. The calls, the emails we got from seniors and people who are recovering from operations and different things and rely on that pool was significant. But it really is important that we focus ahead here now and the changes, upgrades are going to have to be made. But it's a big decision. I'm sure the SCRD would appreciate the support from all communities in making that decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Lee.
I'm actually not voting on this, but I had a question on something that could perhaps be related to asset management elsewhere, and that's in the conclusion on page 143, and it mentions that when we're going to get more information and staff's going to prepare a summary report for board consideration. It sounds like we're doing this, and I was wondering, are we doing some more, and what's the cost of it, and where's the money coming from?
Great questions.
Thank you for your question. There is nothing formal that's going on after this. This report is something, obviously, that we will use in our annual, day-to-day, monthly planning. I think and I'll let Manager Doyle speak to this as well, but my understanding in terms of our conversations is really around, and I mentioned it earlier, I think where we need to go, and I have it in my mind for 2023 starting, is a significant undertaking in the community recreation needs assessment. That is got a significant community engagement piece to it, including owners and operators of other recreation facilities, because oftentimes you need to keep those in mind as you look at recreation as a whole, not just the 5 that you operate. And I think where Manager Doyle was going is that staff will continue to use this information, will continue to address our capital plan, will continue to be looking at trying to identify and recognize our service levels, and then also that community needs assessment, the leases, those all tie into something which will lead to our plan. And I hear you when you say 5 years. I would like to note that, interestingly enough, in that one particular area, it was in the 5th year that a lot of the costs came out, which is, it's a bit of a game as to, is it the 5th year, the 6th year, the 7th year? I'm comfortable with the timing. I think that we have the time that we need, and when I look at, when the leases are up for renewal, it seems to be that perhaps the stars are aligning for us in this planning. So nothing formal, no cost to it at this point. 2023, I think we need to look at that as a priority, and that will have financial implications.
Follow up?
Thank you very much, and I was heartened to hear all facilities, because that's what I feel. We need to look at the big picture of it, so great, thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Director McMahon.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this too. I'll point out we've been looking at the future of some of our committees that we have. We have advisory committees in 4 different areas over which we have little or no jurisdiction. And we don't have an advisory committee for recreation, which we do actually operate. So we did at one point have a recreation advisory committee, and maybe it's time to look at that again too in terms of public participation. I know in Pender Harbor, the community is very active in planning and running the pool there, and that's a possibility too. I just throw it out there.
Thank you, Director McMahon. Director Beamish.
Yeah, I just wonder if this would be an opportunity to discuss this, or at least raise this issue with all governments at an intergovernmental meeting. Is just because it is something that's important to, recreation is important to us all, including the school district. And even though they don't have the facilities that we're talking about, they are big users of those facilities. So it might be a good way to do this at either the next one or a future one.
I see Director Seeger's taking notes. Is the District of Sechelt hosting the next one? Do we know who hosts the next intergovernmental? No? Okay, that's okay. You're taking notes, we'll figure it out. All right, Director Lee, I see your hand up still or again, or? Perfect, thank you very much. I don't see any other hands, and I don't see any specific recommendations that we need to make out of this at this time, so no. We are going to move on. Thank you, Mr. Doyle.
Chair, I'm going to excuse myself. I'm not voting after this, and I have other meetings at 1 o'clock in Gibson, so thank you.
Thank you, Director Beamish. Moving on to Annex O, Tyner Park, Lily Lake Storybook Walk Interpretive Signage Project. Turn it over to Mr. Clarkson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So the purpose of this report is to seek SCRD approval for the Storybook Walk Interpretive Signage Project. Community Services and Parks is pleased to work with Pender Harbor Rotary on this initiative. Staff appreciate the club's interest in offering this interpretive opportunity for the community and the partnerships that involve the school and the nation. Thank you very much, and staff would be happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Thank you very much. Director Lee.
I'm very appreciative, staff, of pushing this forward. It's an excellent community-driven project, and it's really good news that we were able to work with our partners, the Sechelt Nation, and we're looking forward to having some of their books, stories, made available to the broader public through this, and the younger people, our up-and-coming people that are going to deal with all this stuff going forward. So I'm very happy, and I'd like to make a motion to accept the recommendations as presented on page 334.
Thank you, Director Lee. I do see that seconded. I don't see any hands up, so I will call the question on it. All those in favor, A, B, D, E, and F. And sorry, I missed the hands. Can I see them again, please? Thank you, that's carried. All right, moving on to Annex P, Madeira Park Ranger Station Reading Center Mobility Ramp Project. I believe this is back to Mr. Clarkson.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. So the purpose of this report is to seek SCRD approval for the Madeira Park Ranger Station Reading Center Mobility Ramp Project. Community Services and Parks are pleased to work with the Rotary and the Reading Center on this important project. The proposed new mobility ramp is a welcome addition to the building in order to improve access for individuals with mobility challenges or even parents with strollers and small children. Staff very much appreciate the club's interest and willingness to donate to this project. Thank you very much. GM and staff are available and happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Great, thank you very much. Director Lee, I had seen your hand up. There you go. Go ahead. Microphone's not on.
Got to hold the button down a little longer. This project has had a start and stop, and now another start. It occurred quite a while ago in one of the winters, I guess last year, when one of our senior members actually slipped on the stairs and did hurt himself a little bit. And so we had a look at everything and couldn't figure it out how to fix it. But since then, one of the members of the Rotary, who's actually a really great carpenter, had a proposal, and then the engineers have looked at it, and now they've got a design that will solve the problem, and they're willing to not fund it, build it, and I think it's a great project. So I'd like to make a motion to accept the recommendations on page 338 as presented.
And I see that seconded. Thank you, Director Lee. It was one of the questions I had during agenda review because it wasn't immediately obvious to me whether we were talking about wood or concrete ramps. And it is wood, which is, lower impact and, got maintainability and what have you. So that's, that's good to hear. And looking forward to that project moving forward. Hopefully, I will call the question because I don't see any speakers. All those in favor, A, B, D, E, and F. That's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to Annex Q. Portable Toilet Services Contract Extension, GM Gagnon.
Yeah, fairly straightforward order of business, so staff are available to answer questions if there are any.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
I'm in favor of toilets, so I will move the recommendations on page 341.
Thank you, and I have a seconder for that. Director Lee, I do see your hand up. Do you want to speak or leftover?
No, I think the answer was in the report. I was wondering if we decided to put a year-round toilet in Baker Beach, for instance, if we needed to do something different, but the answer is no, it would fit in under this project, so I'm quite comfortable.
All right. And I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question. A, B, D, E, and F. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on, I'd like to look at all three sets of APC minutes. That's annexes R, S, and T. If there's anything that needs to be brought up or out from that. Directors? Director Hiltz?
Thanks, Chair. One of the things that I'm noticing is in some of the staff reports is the date of the imagery. We had an example of the area E example where there was clearing next door. And I'm just wondering if staff has some comments about which imagery they choose in these reports, because 2018 is the SCRD's latest stuff, and we're 2020, we're getting stuff later. So we're kind of waning on the accuracy or the information in the current imagery. So does staff seek out current imagery, or do applicants provide it, or do we try to get the latest information is what I'm kind of latest imagery? If you could have some comments on that.
I believe there was an imagery update project that was supposed to happen, so perhaps.
Yeah, the question is, that's a moment in time, and then as we go along, it deteriorates in its value. So can they use others to supplement as that, is it's every 4 years or every 3 years, so.
Right.
Just, yeah.
Okay. GM Hall?
Thank you, Chair. I'll say that staff always try to use the most recent imagery that we have, and if we're aware that there have been significant changes on the site in question, we might conduct a site visit if it's relevant to the application. And yes, the imagery update will be uploaded soon. Thanks.
Thank you for that update. All right, I don't see any other hands. So in the communications, U, V, and W, is there anything that anybody would like to speak to or address? Director Seegers?
Thank you. In the response from Minister Eby to our letter with regards to climate action in buildings on the Sunshine Coast, when the STEP code was proposed, actually, there were no energy advisors on the Sunshine Coast. And in our meeting last night, our chief building official indicated that we do now have an energy advisor living on the Sunshine Coast. So prior to that, the construction industry had to go bring somebody from off coast. So that's covered off. And it also indicates in here that there is training money available for those who want to actually take that on. So I think we're in a good place. You know, if you know somebody in the community who wants to get into the field, it's going to be huge. There is funding available for training. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Director Ties.
Yeah, thank you. Just the Annex W, the Flynn Road shared decision making. I do want to update everyone that they now have uploaded the updated dock management plan, which wasn't the case last week. So, so just wanted to let you know that that's there now, and ready for your perusal.
Great. Thank you for that update. Director Lee.
This is in regards to Annex W, so, okay. That letter provided, I believe, provides an opportunity for us to further our desire for increased consultation. And specifically, I think we need to reply that the board is not happy with the consultation, well, the lack of consultation that is occurring, and this quarterly meeting, we do not consider it consultation. It's interesting information, but it's after the fact and the decisions are already made. And consultation means that you get to have a say before the decisions are made. So I thought that we could perhaps send a letter in reply. And I do have a motion ready, but I'd like to wait to hear what anybody else thought before I put it forward.
You know what?
No.
Go for it, Director
No
Lee.
question?
Put it forward.
Okay.
We'll have a discussion and then vote on it.
Okay. That a letter be sent to Flynn Row and Seashelt Nation from the board in response, stressing that the quarterly meetings cannot be considered as consultation, and that we continue to ask for effective consultation with the residents and the SCRD, including a seat for the SCRD at the various foundation agreement tables, and that we encourage consultation to continue with FARA to address two major concerns early expressed to our board, specifically concerns related to float buoyancy, stability, and lake transmission, and secondly, environmental reports and studies that do not provide any information justifying the use of zones for dock management.
Okay. That is a very comprehensive motion. I assume the recording secretary has that as well?
No, but I can give it to them. I have
Okay.
it here.
I will second that recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Any comments, discussion? Director McMahon?
I need to give this some thought, but I'm not sure that we need to delve into all of the details of the dock management plan in the letter, but the general, in general, the issue is well stated, and I believe UBCM has also made a motion on this subject, have they not?
Yes, UBCM has passed an MOU, has signed an MOU with the government saying that there should be increased consultation with us for all of these agreements, including the foundation.
Good.
I think that would be something to add to any letter, just, to bolster our case. I'm wondering if we could take this to the next board meeting and that would give us some opportunity to think it through.
Director McMahon, you want to defer this motion to the next board meeting?
Yes, I think that's what I mean. Well, we're only in committee now anyway, so it would go to board, so.
To the board meeting, which is next occurring.
Right.
So would that mean we would update the motion and that this goes to the next board meeting for
Well, it's going to go to the next board meeting anyways, because the committee, we're just in committee, right? So we can have all the discussion we want here, pass whatever recommendations we want, and then when they get to board, we can still manipulate or maneuver the recommendations before approving them.
Sure. I'm okay.
Okay, I think I take that back. I think we should pass it as it stands, and then we can do all the wordsmithing in the next 2 weeks.
Sure, okay. Director Seegers, I saw your hand with nothing. Okay. Director Hills, way down at the end there.
Way down at the end. Yeah, I guess I'm concerned about the relationship, you know, in terms of the wording of the letter and the strength of the dissatisfaction opposed to the working together kind of aspect of what we're trying to do as a board. So that's my concern, is that we've been moving forward, maybe not as quickly as everyone wants, but I see progress. I'm not as intimately involved as Director Lee is, hardly at all at this point in time. But that would be I'm worried about that relationship aspect of it. So in the working together aspect of it, rather than, it sounded a bit heavy to me. The disappointment of the board opposed to, let's try to figure out a way to do it. So that's my comment on it.
Director Seegers.
Thank you. I know that in the background there have been some emails going back and forth between the various parties asking for the consultation to happen because of responses from the FARA and the people up in Pender. So, and I've been privy to that because of some of the other things I've been doing with them. I don't think the letter is heavy-handed, and I think if we're going to have a relationship, an ongoing relationship, we need to express when it is not working for us. And this has been expressed in email form by the director back and forth. I think it's time that we as a board actually say yes, go on record to say we want this to happen. Our residents do need to be heard.
You're good? Go ahead.
Yeah, the follow-up, I haven't been privy to the emails. I don't know if the board has as a whole the public accountability aspect of it, so I'd like to see something more kind of substantive other than what I've been told, yeah. So whether there's a process to bring that forward.
Yeah. No, that's fair. Director Lee.
I don't believe the emails are confidential. I can forward them to the board, no problem, so that you have a full understanding of what's prompting this. I'll do that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments to the motion that is on the floor from Director Lee? I don't see any hands, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Would you like that recorded, Director Hiltz? No? Okay. Thank you. That is passed. All right. Is there any other last-minute business here in our agenda? I don't see any hands up. Well, I do see Director Lee's hand up, but I assume that's a holdover from previously. I know, too many buttons. We don't have an in-camera session, so I'll look for a motion to adjourn. Moved, seconded, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. And we have no attendees in the gallery. Were there any questions received during the meeting?
Nothing.
All right, thank you very much. We'll see everybody at the next one.